A very good evening. On behalf of our Shmiras Haloshen movement of Cherry Hill and Teach 613, we welcome you to this evening session in which we will be studying Mesilas Yesharim in the 11th chapter, Prate Nikiyus, particulars of cleanliness, to be fully on target regarding a variety of mitzvahs which the Ramchal lists. And I'm towards the end of the chapter. If you're in the classic Hebrew English, I'm on page 168. Otherwise, towards the end of the chapter, you'll see a paragraph that's titled Yisera Aleha Chemdas HaKavod, regarding the desire for honor. And this section, I believe, is enormously helpful in helping us be in touch with what it is that we really want for ourselves and what are kind of extraneous desires that really aren't going to make us any happier by having them, but we seem kind of driven to try to acquire them because we have a sense that somehow this will make me feel honored. Now, just to give you an idea of where the Ramchal is going with this. The Ramchal is going to give us specific, very beautiful applications of this, illustrations of kavod. And then, when he finishes the paragraph, he's going to point out that so many people spend an enormous amount of time, resource, energy of life pursuing things that they themselves do not really need for their own happiness. If it was for themselves, they would have what to eat, they would have what to wear, they would have where to live, and they would not need the expression to keep up with the Joneses. And it's only because of their perceived sense of honor, kavod, that they are stressed. I mention often a Rebbe of mine in Lakewood who used to comment that he's a millionaire. And living as he did, a very simple lifestyle, his children would look up and, you're a millionaire, Dad, where's the Swiss account? And he would say, if I lived in the 1800s and I told people that I have 3 floors to my house and a few bedrooms, air conditioning, I would for sure be a millionaire. So the fact that my next door neighbor has it too, does that take away from the fact that I am blessed? And really what's happening here is what the Ramchal is describing. We're busy comparing ourselves to other people instead of being in touch with ourselves. Keep in mind that this is very related to Shmiras Halashon, because if we are in sync with ourselves, then a lot of jealousy automatically goes off. I was in a conversation with my kids about a certain person who was being a little flaunty, and I mentioned to them the fact that he has that doesn't in any way affect what Hashem is going to bless you with. It makes no difference. Your happiness, your blessing, it's not coming out of your account that he has the latest electronic device. Makes no difference. So what's left is for you to sort out what it is that you need. And if you are in fact on the market for the same item, so you can ask him to share his research with you. But that's about it. It really makes no difference. And what's kicking in is a very bad human trait. Desiring kavod, honor. I need to be better than the next person, or at least equal, and the comparison kills us. Let's see how the Ramchal develops it. Yisera aleh chemdes hakavod. Let's discuss the desire for honor. Ki kivar haya efshar sheyichbosh. It would have been possible that a person conquers yitzro al hamamon, his yitzhahara regarding money, va'al sha'ar ha'anos, and other pleasures. Ach hakavod hu adochik. It's the honor that's pressuring him that he can't seem to overcome. Ki efshar lo lispel, this is the key. A person can't handle. This word lispel is amazing. He can't handle it. He can't shoulder it. Anybody know what a schlepper is called? Person who schleps heavy loads in Hebrew. A sabal. You can't shoulder the enormity of this weight that you've created. There is no weight here. You're paying your bills. You're buying food. But you're not more honorable than your fellow, and therefore you are stressed. To see yourself having less than your fellow. Picture the scene. You have a guy who puts a refrigerator on his back. Good Mideast tradition. He puts a refrigerator on his back and he climbs up 3 flights to deliver your refrigerator. He's bent over, he's crunched under the weight of this refrigerator. But at least what he's doing makes sense because he's getting paid. And the human being does the same thing to himself for no productive reason. Walking around, slouched, crunched over, suffering under an emotional burden, taking on extra jobs or stressing or I don't know what, for something he doesn't need physically, because as far as he's concerned, he could do with the car that he has, and he could do with the paint job that his house has, and he doesn't really need the vacation that is being described in its extravagance, but he needs to do it because his neighbor is doing it. In the attitude of the Ramchal, can you find anything more foolish in the world than this? Person can't sleep at night, but it's stress of his own making. Comparing himself to somebody else. Related to this, of course, is the standard, very classic expression that if Hashem would take your life and make it into a transparent bundle and do the same for everybody around you, we would all take our own bundle. Because that's what we're equipped to handle. That's what we're wired to handle. But instead, we're comparing, usually external things. It looks brighter by them, and therefore I want it. And we'll see the Ramchal is such a gift here. He cites very specific examples so that you could start comparing yourself to these examples that are listed in the Torah, how these people failed, and are we playing in to the same errors in our lives. The first one that he cites is Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat was the one who set up the alternate kingdom, to be very diplomatic. He started the rebellion against Rechavam, the son of Shlomo, and started the Israelite kingdom, kind of competing with the kingdom of Yehuda, the traditional Jewish kingdom. Yeravam ben Nevat realized that if he simply creates a kingdom, eventually the people will gravitate back to the legitimate king. So what he did was, in addition to his kingdom, he created an alternate to the Beis HaMikdash so that people should not go to the Beis HaMikdash on the holidays, Aliyah L'Regel, and instead they should worship in his temples. Hashem tells Yeravam ben Nevat, who was a very great man, if you do teshuvah, you reunite the Jewish nation. You tell them to stop doing this idol thing, then you will be on my good list again, and you and David and me will walk in Gan Eden together. We'll be buddies. Quite an offer. If this was offered to you, you take it? No? Okay. Yeravam ben Nevat asks, Mi barosh, who goes first? Am I first or David's first? And Hashem answers, honestly, David comes first. David is the legitimate king, and you're, I guess, about tshuva, but you're not the real king. You're the king because you created a crisis, and now you come back and acknowledge David's rulership, but you're really not the king of the house of David. You're your own story. Hashem says David comes first. And Yeravam answers, Ihachi lo ba'ina, if those are the terms of the deal, I'm not interested. And he doesn't do tshuva. Now, what's, forgive me, almost comical here, is someone has to go first. If we're going to make a condition in our lives that I will not cooperate unless I'm first, that puts us in a very precarious situation. There's still a few rotaries here in New Jersey. Traffic circles. Try Yeravam ben Nevat's attitude on a traffic circle. Either I go first, or I'm not following the rules. Where's that going to leave us? Someone's got to go first. Sometimes someone's going to go first. In my kids' school, there's a sign up. If you hold the door for somebody else and let them go through first, then your good midos go first. You can't have everyone walking around, I'm going, it doesn't make sense. But kavod is irrational. I need my kavod. I need my honor. It's very scary. A second example. Mi goram lekorach sheyovad. Who caused Korach to be destroyed? So let's recall the story of Korach. He comes home from a tough day at work in the Mishkan under the leadership of Moshe and Aaron, and he doesn't like the way he was treated. And he comes home, but he's not quite sure because everybody reveres Moshe and Aaron. So whatever they were doing is probably what Hashem told them to do. He comes home, and he tries to emote to his wife, and his wife riles him up. His wife tells him, they have disgraced you. They're taking advantage of you. And suddenly Korach sees the world in a very different way. Because the person he trusted with his emotions to interpret those emotions for him interpreted them negatively. This is quintessential Shmiras HaLashon topics. when we share something with someone, we're essentially asking for their opinion. We're hoping, I guess, for our own comfort that we're going to get validation. Sometimes, if it involves a boss or somebody that we really need their approval, we might deep down be hoping that the person should take a harsh stance against us and put us in our place so that we go ahead and make peace in the workplace or wherever and set things right. But we are asking for the other person's opinion. And we don't realize that if we're being talked to in such a venue, are becoming the judges on this person's future. They tell us how they were offended, and we tell them, oh yeah, they offend you, they offend everyone, it's a terrible thing, we have to make this right, let's go on a crusade. Or maybe we should approach them and discuss this. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, and all the things that we've learned. The wife of Korach, cited by the Medrash, just like the wife of Haman, destroyed their husbands by interpretation. We're approaching Purim. It's never too early. Zeresh tells Haman, this Mordechai, you got to destroy him. And this is what Haman's goal becomes. And it's all an interpretation. For the same money, she could have said, he's a pious Jew. If he doesn't want to bow to him, leave him be. But she can't give that advice. And the wife of Korach can't give that advice. The wife of On ben Peles is the wise one. Chachmas isha bansa besa. The wise lady asks her husband, what do you stand to gain from this crusade anyway against Moshe and Aaron? You're anyway not a Levi. You're anyway not going to get anything out of this. Which, by the way, is a small baby step towards brilliance. Ask yourself, what are you really going to gain if you continue? I mentioned last night by the Parsha class that sometimes you have somebody who starts screaming and yelling. Ask yourself, just on a practical level, what stands to be gained over here? And if you get the sense that nothing's going to be gained, then don't do it. I mentioned last night, I thought it was a very cute analogy. Politicians, as much as we are cautious and we make jokes, but there's something very powerful, very good, worthy of emulation in a good politician. A good politician pays attention to what he wants. And he tries not to ruin the potential of getting what he wants, even if it means making peace with people that he hates, that he differs with. Politics makes strange bedfellows expression. He's got his eye on the ball. Korach doesn't. Korach asked him, at the end of the day, all 250 people aren't going to become Kohanim Gedolim anyway. So what do you have in mind here? It becomes a crusade in which there are no winners. All based on someone else's interpretation of the events. The third example that the Ramchal gives is the Meraglim, and I think there's a lot to learn from this. The Meraglim speak badly about Eretz Yisrael, the spies. In the words of the Ramchal, going on to page 170, Miyir Asam, because they were afraid, Pen Yimat Kivodam Bekenisas Haaretz, lest their honor be diminished when they come into the land. They were afraid of transition. They don't know where that's going to leave them. And the stability of desert living, how's that? The stability, they like it. The mun comes every day. The Be'er Shel Miriam, they got their water, they're provided for. Everything is stable and reliable. They're afraid of transition to the new level. Where's that going to leave me? They're afraid of it. So they sabotage the plan and say that it's not good. Now, let's think for a moment. What would be the antidote to the Meraglim syndrome? You have a new plan in the workplace. You have a new situation in life. You're taking on a new daughter-in-law. Whatever it is. And it's scary. You're not sure where this is going. So a person is tempted to sabotage it with all the negativity, with Lashon Hara, about what is essentially a reasonable plan. What's the antidote? What could save a person in such a case?
I could say Hashem always took care of them until now.
Very good. If a person has a decent dose of bitachon, so then the attitude would be, if it's a reliable, well-researched progress that we're looking at, so then let's have faith that it's going to work out. Let's have bitachon. It's okay. The unknown isn't necessarily bad. And the Meraglim is an example where, because of their honor and because of their fear that something might change, it's true. Maybe you'll be retired with a pension. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen. But if Hashem says that this is a good land, that apparently should not be the fear-driven situation that they find themselves in. And finally, the Ramchal quotes the case of Shaul. Shaul takes on David as a son-in-law. And David is enormously successful. And the word on the street is that David surpasses Shaul. And Shaul becomes jealous. Now, what's interesting over here is that Shaul is losing the kingdom to David, even though it didn't officially happen until after Shaul dies, but David has already been anointed. Shaul is losing the kingdom, not because David's so great, and not because David is trying to undermine his authority. Shaul is losing the kingdom because he did something wrong. Anybody remember? In the case of Amalek, he was supposed to destroy, and he didn't. So he loses the kingdom. Because as sins go, a king has to be the authority. You'll notice, just as an aside, David also has failings. But the failings are not in his role as king. They're personal failings, and he has to settle them. And he has a lot to settle. But it wasn't in being king. Shaul loses it because it was in being king. Shaul is losing it and it hurts him. But he's losing it not because of David. He has an issue that he needs to work out. But he ends up taking it out and feeling harshly towards David. Again, a very great lesson with a very obvious antidote. Sometimes things are unfortunate, are happening in our lives, but they have absolutely nothing to do with the other person. And if we want, we can get jealous, and if we want, we can have our own honor. Picture a person, God forbid, loses their job. Their neighbor has a well-paying job. So he buys a new car, and he's going on vacation, and he's doing great shopping, etc. The blessing that he's experiencing has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that this other person has lost his job. He's got an issue that he needs to work out, but it's not relevant to the fact that the other person has what he wants. It's not the same field, it's not the same job, it's not your job, but kavod, the desire in the comparison, could kick in and cause enormous hard feelings.
Question.
Yeah.
Is it possible that Shaul thought if David weren't around, then he might be able to stay king because there's no one else to fill his role?
A person can feel lots of things. Could Shaul have felt that if David wasn't around, he would continue to be king? He could feel whatever he wants to feel, but the prophet had told him at that time that he's losing the kingdom. So anything can run through his mind, and yes, these are things that as human beings we are subject to such feelings. But grounded, if a person works it through, David's presence is not taking away anything from Shaul. On the contrary, there was no one who was willing to meet Goliath in battle, and David is willing. What could be better for Shaul as king if someone's willing to do the job? And David senses that blessing from the time that he's anointed, that he could take on tasks that no one else would dare take on. But Shaul feels this way. And you're right, Shaul feels that way. Klolo shel davar, this is what I mentioned in the overview, where the Ramchal is going with this. The summation is hakavod v'adochek es leva adam. The desire for honor pushes a person more than all other desires of the world. Lulei zeh, if not for this, a person would be able to eat masha yucha, whatever he needs, lilbosh masha yechasa, he would wear whatever he needs, clothing, and lishkon, to dwell in a house that protects him. Vaisa parnasaso kala, and everything would be very easy. But people are very nervous that other people should respect them, that they should be on par with everyone else. And therefore this drives people and results often in hard feelings or in personal stress, both of which could lead in the exact emotional state which leaves us so vulnerable for speaking or accepting lashon hara about another person. So again, the four of the Ramchal's examples which we mentioned this evening, you have Yeravam ben Nevat, who has painted himself into an impossible situation. He has to be first. Someone's got to be second. He's got to be first. Otherwise, no gain. Korach goes to the wrong person to interpret his emotions. The Meraglim are fearful of transition and that their honor might be lowered. And Shaul has his own issues to settle, but he somehow projects them on David as if David is the fault for which he's suffering, instead of what he really needs to do is deal with his failing on his own and recognize that David is only ascending because Jewish people needs that, and David is from the kingdom of Yehuda, and Shaul has to work out his issues separately, really independent of what's developing as a jealousy that Shaul wants to be greater than David. Questions and comments? Was I sufficiently clear or sufficiently intimidating?
Very clear.
Let's move on to the Shmiras Halashon review. The case of saying negative information for a constructive purpose is when it will not cause actual damage. It's only causing a limitation on a proposed benefit. You're called up by somebody as a reference. They want to enter into a relationship, a shidduch, a business relationship, a partnership, whatever it is. Your information, if you feel it necessary to share damaging information, is going to curtail that opportunity. It's going to cut it short. Because when you relate the negative information, they're going to rethink whether they should enter into this partnership or not. But that's all it's going to do. And then you'd be allowed to do it. If, however, damage will be caused more than is legally justifiable in Beis Din, then you're not allowed to do it. We've mentioned this. If someone is running a business in a way that some people feel is taking advantage of the customers, and you're very angry, and you bring a product that you think was sold damaged back for return, and the person says 30-day policy of return, I can't take it back, and you're very angry. So you as a consumer definitely have the ability to do damage to this store. You could smash his windows at night when no one's looking. You can tell people that he is a vile creature and should not be trusted and no one should shop there. There are things that you could do, but you're not allowed to do them. The right and responsibility to say over negative information is only to the extent that it will stop other people from being damaged, or of course if you're going to bring a case in a court, so okay, you're going to bring the case. But the damage that you're doing on the street in excess of what you're entitled, let's say you're legally entitled to the return of the item and a full refund, so for argument's sake, that's $59.99. That's what you're entitled. If you start damaging them in town, more than that, so then that wasn't permitted. If you're truly protecting people, so then you're protecting people. You're stopping additional relationships from developing, but they have to be, as we've always mentioned, only in accordance with Torah law. If the person was within his bounds to say 30-day return policy, I'm sorry, I don't know if you got it damaged. Maybe it got damaged by you, for all I know. Go prove it. If in a court of law he would be right, then halachically he's not damaging you. And halachically you have no right to start saying that he's damaged you if he goes to Beis Din and he says, whatever the ruling is, that's what I'll do. If I have to refund the money, I will. And the ruling is that he doesn't. So that even though you feel that he does, that doesn't give you the right to speak against him.
Question.
Yeah.
If not everybody goes to Beis Din, so how would you know? Are you allowed to tell somebody what happened with that he couldn't return the product?
What we find very often is that even if the case doesn't go to Beis Din because it's virtually impossible in some cases and whatever, we do find that people ask a shaila. They ask, what would the halacha be in such a case? And if you're told that the storekeeper is manipulating and taking advantage of people, but it's true that he's wrong and he's not allowed to do it, it could be you're allowed to relate that information to a prospective customer. Sometimes word gets out that the guy's got inferior goods and he's selling them at premium prices and he's playing a game that he makes himself unavailable for returns until the 30-day expires. Beis Din might not be able to get him, but they might be able to tell you that you're correct in warning people about him. And if you can get such a ruling, then that's what you were looking for. That's Das Torah. That's asking a shaila. Chavetz Chaim gives a fascinating case. If a person hears someone say, if I encounter so-and-so in that place, I will do damage to them, financially, or embarrass them. If you believe that it's not an exaggeration and a trap is truly being set, you're allowed to inform the vulnerable person of the plan so that they can protect themselves. He continues, you have to be careful only to tell somebody and warn if they're going to protect themselves. But if they're going to use this information to purposely pick a fight and get themselves ready, so then there's no reason to tell them, because that's just making it bigger and there's a chance it'll peter out. You have to know who you're dealing with and whether they're going to leverage the information you're sharing with them in a healthy and productive way. If it's possible, the Chavetz Chaim says you should certainly calm the person who's angry so that you don't have to relate the Lashon Hara. You could just stop the thing to begin with. But, he adds, if the relationship is an ongoing one, it's unlikely that you'll be able to calm them every time. And you really do have to warn them to protect themselves. Okay. Any comments?
Are you allowed to say if a storekeeper is pushy and tries to make you buy something under false pretenses, even if the item is good quality, but they just use salesman techniques?
Well, let's say someone asks you, so what do you think about shopping in that store? And you found that you felt very taken advantage of because you walked in to buy a broom and you ended up walking out having bought a dishwasher that you didn't need. So you feel like they really know sales and you're not sure how to protect yourself, and it took you a while to realize, now that you have a dishwasher that you don't need and a few other appliances, that this is getting a little silly, and you realize there's something going on here. If you feel that the person who's asking you about that store is equally vulnerable and will not see through this, I suspect that you're allowed to say the facts. You might say it as a joke. You know, I know I'm a little gullible, but I found that I went in for one item and somehow I managed to be buying something else that I didn't really think I needed. And afterwards I wasn't quite sure why I bought it. What you might end up with is at least planting a seed in the prospective customer's mind so that when this happens to them, they should be able to protect themselves, even though it's not an evil thing. But on the other hand, you know, it is a degree of taking advantage.
You can only say that to a person. How do you know how naive someone is? If someone asks me, I tell a story, the salesman said this, I know I bought this, and she says, well, what's the name of the store? Well, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell it or not. I don't know if she's naive. Maybe she probably isn't as naive.
Even if you're going to say, you have to stick to the facts.
But you can.
You can't say that they're evil. They're not evil. They didn't do anything evil. Right? You can't say that they cheat. You have to stick to the facts, and that's what's really important. If you really feel you're going to protect them, and you're not going to hurt the store. You're just trying to keep things according to halachic norms. People go into stores, they're supposed to be able to exercise free choice to buy or not buy.
Because you can't know someone else's vulnerabilities, you know.
So within reason,
you could tell.
You try to see. Right. We don't walk around advertising everybody because more damage can be done. That's not necessary and not justified. But if we can make an estimated guess that it is helpful and protecting, so then you'd be allowed to say it, but you'd have to really make sure to stick to the facts and not exaggerate, because that's really when a person starts getting offended and emotional about it. That's where they enter into the realm of interpretation and really becoming Lashon Hara. Okay. Yasher Koach, thank you very much for joining.